Hello, everyone, and welcome to our community activism panel discussion. My name is Pekka Reinio. I'm the president of the Barrie Innisfil NDP Riding Association. And with me tonight, I have four terrific panelists. First, Alicia Gostkowski. Alicia is a Lakehead grad with an honors BA in political science and criminology. Alicia is pursuing her master's in social justice and equity studies at Brock University, and she was the principal organizer of the first ever Black Lives Matter rally held in Innisfil 3 weeks ago. Hello, Alicia.
Hi.
We also have Jacques Edwards. Shak is the creator of Shak's World, a Barrie organization founded on the idea that a sports organization can deliver both athletic and community development at every age and ability. Shak was an electrifying speaker at the Innisfil Black Lives Matter event. Thanks for joining us tonight, Shak. We also have Daniel Tucker. Daniel is a politics and psychology student at Lakehead University. He's a longtime climate change activist and gained much notoriety for the success of the Orillia climate strike last year. And Daniel is also a Black Lives Matter organizer in the Orillia area. Great to have you with us tonight, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, Angelique Belcourt. Angelique is a master's student at U of T in adult education and community development. Angelique was also an NDP candidate in Simcoe North during the last federal election. Great to have you with us tonight, Angelique.
Bonjour, everyone.
In keeping with Indigenous protocol and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada, it's customary to acknowledge the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples. So I'd like to acknowledge this sacred land on which we are hosting our community activism town hall tonight. This land has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the ancestral land of the Huron-Wendat and the Anishinaabe Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty. So we are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and are committed to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect. I was at the Black Lives Matter event a couple of weeks ago in Innisfil, and I met one participant for whom this rally really sparked a keen interest for her to get involved. She'd never been to a protest before, she told me, or a march of any kind, but the Black Lives Matter event inspired her to become an activist. So, can I just ask each of you, what sparked your interest in becoming an activist? And maybe, Alicia, I'll ask you to speak to this one first.
Okay. It's kind of been a long journey and a long road for me. Like I don't think there's like one kind of moment that really stands out for me and like what sparked me to become an activist. I just think like it's kind of what I was meant to do. When I started university, especially, I really started noticing like a lot of changes in myself, a lot of changes in my worldview, because I was being like put in a world with like a bunch of different people and a bunch of different ideas and a bunch of different ways of thinking. And that kind of like really sparked like, oh, there's a lot more going on in the world that like I wasn't really exposed to in high school, elementary school, and otherwise. And growing up in a small town as well, like it really kind of like put the importance of activism out there to me, especially in a small town, in places where people just like don't unfortunately have access to the information or don't have access to diversity. And that's kind of what really kind of put that out there for me. And I was like, oh.
Alicia, where did you grow up? I told everyone that you go to Lakehead and Orillia, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in Alcona, so I grew up just off of Innisfil Beach Road. Yeah, so it's quite a nice little town, but we need to have activists in Innisfil, and that's why like organizing the Black Lives Matter protest in Innisfil was super important to myself and my co-organizers Angie and Cassie. And thank you, Shak, for emceeing that event as well. That was awesome. It was incredible to have you there.
Yeah, Shak, you did a great job. Your speech was electrifying. Everyone was so impressed by your talk there. Shak, was there an event for you, one that's really sparked things for you, or was it more like Alicia? It was a slowly coming together of different ideas and thoughts?
For me, the one thing that I speak on the most is youth mental health. And that is something that's super important to me because not only did I go through my own mental health struggles, but I didn't have access to all the resources that were available. Like Aleesha said, you don't really know what's available in a small town. So I started off being an activist for youth mental health and really trying to get the word out there that there are these kids that need the help. And it just, I guess, kind of spiraled. I've always been the type of person that speaks on whatever's in my heart. I speak on matters that are important to me. So much like the Black Lives Matter rally, I probably would not have spoken in front of that many people if it wasn't something so important to me. So I guess my activism really comes from personal experiences and a lot of just heart.
Right. Daniel, you and I, we've seen each other at many climate rallies over the last few years. Was there something that sparked it for you, getting to become an activist in climate and Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, absolutely. It all started when I was in college, and I was really getting into the science of the world and critical thinking and all of that knowledge base from my college programs. And I just started realizing that in order to follow the science, I have to follow the climate change. And it just became such a passion for me that I started just doing whatever I can. I went to a local event that was organized, and I just did my best to make sure that the climate voice was heard and everything. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled into me becoming this activist that just tries to make the world a better place, you know? And I've done a few events now, and that's about it. I just try and do my best.
You're being very modest there, Daniel. Your event in Orillia last year was fantastic. So, hey, Angelique, what about you? Was there an event, or was it more of a slow growing, a growth to become an activist?
Forgot I was muted. Yeah, I would say similar to Aleesha, like I feel like giving myself the opportunity to pursue post-secondary education really opened a lot of windows for me. I grew up in Toronto, but moved back home to Penetanguishene in high school, and I really witnessed the big contrast in terms of supports that I had witnessed, like my friends who were accessing like mental health supports and community supports versus what that kind of looked like to have a healthy, happy life here for a lot of the youth. And I just think that in post-secondary education, I really had the opportunity to really connect with my community, the Indigenous community, the Métis community, where I really recognized that my community was taking a lot of time to take action on the things that we needed and self-determination and self-governance. And then I think when it came to really working with my community and working with the Indigenous community, I witnessed a lot of things hands-on that needed systematic change. And I didn't really have the choice to not be an activist in those kinds of situations. And so I would really say that through my work experience kind of solidified to me that I was capable of being an activist just by rallying around my community, rallying around other people, and amplifying their voices.
Is there a difference? Maybe I'll ask Shak first, but anyone can jump in on any of these questions tonight. Shak, what does it mean to be an activist? Like some of us do work that is related to social issues in our community. Some of us are politicians, others are leaders elsewhere. But what is it to be an activist?
Activists use their voices. I mean, anybody who I know that is activating is putting their best foot forward and trying to create a change for a better society. So all activists really do, they bring light to the situations that people don't want to look at. They bring light to things that may not be ready to change, but need to change at the time. So that's what I believe an activist is. It's someone that'll speak up for what's right, speak up for what needs to be changed, because I know a lot of people are terrified to speak, but activists, they're change makers. We're here to change. So we speak.
Aleesha, you're nodding. You agree?
I do. I agree completely. And I think that in the age of social media as well, like, I mean, a lot of people may not understand, but you can be an activist through social media too. And that's a really big and important thing that we're seeing a lot of change with as well, like being able to post and to share things. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't know that. They don't know that like activism comes in so many forms. Like it's people who speak up and it's people who fight for change, but it's also people who speak up on social media. It's having a conversation with your family if they say something that you don't like, or with your friends if they say something that isn't right. It's having these difficult conversations and being able to put the word out and to share things that are important.
I like what Shak said there about raising your voice towards issues that maybe aren't quite ready or aren't quite in the forefront just yet. So maybe that's a key part of activism. Daniel, is that what you find with climate change and with Black Lives Matter and Aurelia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the biggest things that people fail to realize is that you don't have to be an activist by standing on a stage and giving a speech. Activism comes in so many different forms. Like, I have a friend in the States that just bakes cookies for protesters, and I think that's absolutely amazing. And because from what I hear, they don't have the ability to actually get out and participate or give speeches and stuff. But just something as small as that, just baking cookies, or, you know, having a tough conversation with your friends and family. And like, I recently just got back into contact with someone who's pretty problematic, but, you know, they're putting in the effort to try and understand and have these conversations. And hell, I'd even call them an activist, even though they're pretty problematic themselves. And it's just the sheer wanting to make things better, I think, makes you an activist. And you can let that happen in so many different ways. You can bake cookies, you can talk to your friends, you can hold events, you can try and just listen to the people that are knowledgeable in specific areas. Listen to the climate scientists when we're talking about climate change. Listen to people of color when we're talking about people of color issues. Listen to Indigenous voices when they're speaking, and just listening can make you an activist. So I really find it unfortunate that so many people think that if they're not standing in front of an audience speaking, then they aren't doing anything. But I know so many people that just by sharing articles or stuff, that anybody can really be an activist. And that's what I have to,
Daniel, that's a great point. You know, when you have a movement, even if it's a small movement, there's so many different parts that need people to play different roles, and the baking of the cookies, the organizing of the stage, all that kind of stuff. They're all important parts. Even if people aren't on the stage talking, there's other people playing important parts. So good points raised. Hey, Angelique, I was just wondering, and you and I spoke about this the other day, and you had some good points on this. Should we be tackling, because there's so many social issues right now that are being discussed, important ones. Should we be tackling these issues individually, or is there another way? Should they come under one big umbrella? So should we be addressing climate change on its own? Should we be addressing Indigenous concerns on its own? Should we be addressing Black Lives Matter on its own? Or do these all come under one umbrella? Angelique.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
Out a little there. Yeah, I think that, like I mentioned this before, and particularly in the stance of youth, I don't think youth have the patience to wait for something to change. I think when an event or something problematic or whatever it be arises in our society, we know to react, we know to collaborate, we know to gather our communities together. And so I don't think that they necessarily all fall in the same umbrella, but we need to remember the context in which many of the things that we're advocating falls under, which are problematic white supremacy, colonialism. You know, we need to name these bigger structures that are causing our communities to have to move in these kinds of ways and hold those kinds of systems accountable to making change. And so I think as long as we can keep in mind like the more structural stuff that causes that, I don't think that there's a specific time to focus on anything, because when change needs to happen, it needs to happen, and we need to make that movement.
Anybody else will have a thought on that one? Like, do we address these social issues individually or under one big umbrella? Or maybe there's another way.
Well, yeah. I could, sorry. Go ahead, Daniel. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure. I think that, to be quite honest with everyone, like, this is a revolution that's going on right now. If you look at everything that's going on in the States, people are a revolution.
You're getting my next question, Daniel, but go ahead.
Yes, but I think that if we take all of these issues and we just combine them into one movement, that we can really get some change done. We can really address the systematic injustice. We can address the root cause, which I will always advocate as capitalism. And we can take a look at all of these things and just start one big social push and really get everything to an ideal society, because we're so close, I think. And when it comes to like Indigenous issues, people of color's issues, and like poverty issues, capitalism issues, all of these things, we're so close to a society where we can actually survive together. And I think that I think that we're waiting on just one more thing to just get everybody on board and just push forward, that we can really combine all of these small individual movements into one big push to make
Shak
the world a
is
lot
Shak
better.
is agreeing with you here. Shak?
Yeah, well, I in Shaq's world, stay humble and kind is our motto. So the way I see it is every single issue that we face is a personal issue. If everyone just was kind and everyone treated everything with the love that they would treat, say, their loved ones with, like, the climate wouldn't be as bad if people didn't litter. And I was saying earlier that it breaks my heart to watch people throw litter on the ground. That is how much I love where I live. I love where I live enough to respect every single person, but that's a personal choice. So when it comes to all of the different issues, it all comes down to who we are, and that is something that I speak about a lot in my speeches. It's stay humble and kind. It's be your best self when you go out into the world, because we all affect this world, all of us. And it's a mindset that we have to have. The mindset we need to have is that if we love everything, then it'll love us back, and then we won't see racism. We won't see our earth falling apart. We won't see as much white supremacy. It's all about love. And you guys I don't know if you guys agree with me, but it comes down to the core of what the problem is. And it's making sure that people understand themselves and making sure that people are taking the time to understand each other, because we've got so many different backgrounds. But unless you take that time, you'll never be able to get to that understanding. You'll never be able to get to that place where you can be kind to someone just because they could have gone through something, right? So that's kind of how I see it. So I guess to answer the question, it is under one umbrella, and the umbrella is we need to clean ourselves so that we can clean the world.
Yeah. Hey, Aleesha, one of my favorite authors is Naomi Klein, and she wrote a terrific book called This Changes Everything. And Naomi Klein is known for her climate activism, but she says you cannot tackle climate change without also tackling inequality, racism, systemic racism. They all need to come together. They will not be addressed on their own. So what do you think on that one, Aleesha?
I agree completely. They do all tie together. These issues tie together. I mean, obviously, of course, we do need to focus on certain issues at certain times, and we need to give certain issues a spotlight. Because if we don't allow certain issues to kind of take the forefront, then I fear sometimes maybe things are forgotten about. But I think that we are so mobilized at this point, and a lot of people are on the same page here, that we can look at these issues and we can say, you know what, like, we can't have climate activism until we have like racial justice, until we fight inequality, because that's really the root of all of these problems. And I think that's what everybody has been saying here. It's like we need to fight the root of the problem to really be able to see change in all of these areas.
And I also want to add to that and say that right now is an amazing time where we are seeing the roots. We are seeing the roots of all the problems. And now is the time for us to take the time to understand all the problems. And then when we get back into the world, it's now combating that, right? It's not it's stopping people when they're saying the wrong things. It's not agreeing with people when you learn something that you know is right.
Daniel, you said we're right on the cusp. We're so close. Maybe there's one more thing. Like, what did you mean by that?
I mean that. Give me a second. Okay, so the way I explained it before was, you see how we've had years and years of injustice by police forces all over the world, and then we've had so many people murdered and beaten and stuff, and it took just the one spark of George Floyd, and we had massive outbreaks around the world. And I see that as hope that things can get better. And we had Greta with the climate change, and I think that we just have individual people that are just going to make so much of a difference. And I feel like we're just so close to just making that final push for equality, because I look at the grand scheme of history over the last few hundred years, and I see such an exponential growth in kindness and stuff. And I really want to hold on to that. Like, there's a part of me that just likes to just try not to look at all the horrible things going on in the world, and just try and push.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Shak.
I was just going to say, I said in an interview the other day that I'm trying my very best not to go online so that I don't get swayed by the different opinions of everything and everyone that's chiming in right now. It's really important for us as activists to remember our why, remember what we're fighting for. So I absolutely agree with you. Staying or just paying attention to the things that makes sense in your lane is important, because personally, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I know that there are two different sides to everything. And I keep saying that I'm not going to say that it's police versus people or black versus white. I'm going to say it's good versus evil, because we're all left up to choice at the end of the day. And so for me, not paying attention to all of the things going around that could possibly sway how I feel is super important as someone that uses their voice authentically.
That's a good point. So you're not distracted and pulled in all sorts of different directions, and you know what road you're traveling. Hey, Angelique, we had a practice session, a few of us the other day for tonight's event. And at that practice session, you said that young people can change the world. And so I'm just wondering, you and everybody else, is that still the case? Can young people change the world? Maybe I'll start with Angelique and everyone else can jump in after that.
Yeah, I say this often, but as an Indigenous youth, I take my responsibility as youth very strongly. And in the context in which I shared that was that we currently live in a time where youth are not really okay with how the world is developing. It's not a world that's created for us. It's a world where we see a lot of inequity, a lot of injustice. We want more peace. We want to be able to make the change so we can live in a world that is mindful of our environment, mindful of our Shakak-Makwe, our mother nature, mindful of each other. And so the context in which I really shared that was that youth are trying to make a change in this time, because we recognize that we don't want to survive in the world that's kind of built for us right now. We want to thrive. We want to make a difference. We want to be there for one another, and we want to make a change. And so yeah, that's the context.
You also said that the world that we're living in right now is created for an older generation, and that young people want a new world. So what is it that young people want for the future? You did mention a few things, but maybe I'll throw that out to everyone else first. What is it that young people want to see to be for them in the world's coming? Daniel, you looked eager to speak out on that one.
Yeah, I see this world. I was recently in a video where I was yelling at a police officer. Unfortunately, it was not a good video. But I mentioned in this video that I was just trying to create a world that dogs think exists, and it was just such a line that I just said it because I was looking at this dog. Like, I just want to create a world that you think exists, and it's a really big contrast between that, and I think we're so close to it. And what I mean by that is, like, dogs think that everyone is equal and that everyone has rights, and like everyone is treated fairly. And like, if you asked a dog how it would think the world would respond to a global pandemic, you think that we would have like free access to masks, we would have free access to like hazmat suits for people that like actually need it. Like, it was funny because I saw this post, and it was, what is the problem if 99% of people are going to be completely unaffected by the coronavirus? And I thought, okay, so does that mean that you're about to write off 1% of the entire world? And a dog would not put up with that. And that's what I mean. Like, we're so close.
Yeah.
But sorry, somebody's phone. But we're just so close to that world that exists.
Shak, you work with a lot of young people. What do they want to see in the next 10, 20 years?
Equality. One thing that we've been doing recently that's been a new thing is corresponding with the Barrie police very often. And these kids, the only thing that they want is to not be stopped on their way home from the gym. That is something just as minuscule. That is something so minuscule, but so huge in their world. These kids don't see the way that our parents saw. They don't see the way that our grandparents saw. They just want to coexist and have a good time. They don't want to have to worry about anything. They don't have to worry. They don't want to have to worry about someone calling them a racial slur because they're walking down the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're in a completely different time. And that's where, with what I do and the Stay Humble and Kind, it works with children because they want to see that. It's not a fight to get kids to be nice to each other. It's a fight to get their parents to understand why they're nice to each other. You see? And that's why there's people like us. We're in the middle. We're in the middle. I know myself, I'm just almost phasing out of my youthhood. And I would just like to make sure that future is there for them. Like I will speak up to make sure that equality is there for them so they can be unified in a community where they can walk around and say hey to the police and hate everyone and nobody's scared or anything. And I think that that's what they want. And I believe by what I hear and what I see and the way they behave when they're together, that's what they want, is just to coexist and not worry about anything, because it's a beautiful life when you're not worried.
Thank you. Good, excellent points, Shak. Angelique, Aleesha, what do you think? What are kids or young people looking for in the next 10, 20 years? What changes do you think they'd like to see?
I think everybody kind of hit the nail on the head there with all of that. Like, it's true. Like, we want a world that is good for us. We want a different world. We want something that works for us. We don't want to be, like, as Angelique said, like, we don't want to be struggling to survive. We want to thrive. And I think that's the biggest thing here. Like, we want meaningful change. We want everybody to be equal, everybody to have a voice, everybody to feel like they're welcome in this world, because I think that's so important. And also, like, in regards to things like the housing market and stuff like that, like, we need to
the world is not built for us right now.
Exactly.
I feel you.
Yeah, like, we need
Angelique,
to take a step back from capitalism.
Angelique brought up housing the other day when she was talking about what young people want.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that also came up in that conversation, Aleesha had shared in that conversation, was that we have young people who want their voices heard, and want their voices heard in government, want their voices heard when it comes to conversations about housing, about livelihoods. So it's not only amplifying young people's voices, but actually lowering the voting age, like making sure that they can be informed about the things that will impact them in life, not waiting till they graduate in high school and kind of thrown into this mess of having to figure out everything on their own, but more of like, okay, let's get them engaged. Let's get them knowing about like how, these bigger systems, and I'm sorry to say bigger systems, but how the world kind of works, and give them the ability to be able to work within that and decide whether or not they want to make those changes. It's not just amplifying those voices, it's empowering young people to be able to have that knowledge.
Yeah, that's right.
Well spoken, awesome. Well said. Hey,
and that right there, I'm sorry, but
no, go ahead.
Right there is why recently, and I mean very recently, as I mentioned, there have been youth talking with the Barrie police about the change that they want to see. And there's a reason for that. I have been talking with them for 4 years, and I'm like, you know what? No, it's not my turn anymore. Now they have a platform. Now they have a chance to let you know what they want, and it's time for you to listen. And I think right now the young people that are activating they've captivated, and people are listening. And I think that giving youth that opportunity more giving youth that opportunity more would only make a better world for all of us, because they see further than we can. They see further than what someone in their mid-30s could see, or 30 and above, because they've got that fresh mind still. So it's amplifying them and letting them create the future, because really they're the ones that are going to be living in it, and they're the ones that are going to build it. So why not let them?
Daniel, could you speak to the climate movement and what young people are looking for in terms of climate change?
Yeah, what young people are looking for in climate change is to not die, to be completely honest. Because we're noticing that, for all of these, old white people that are not doing anything, we're like, no, that's unacceptable. We're the ones that are going to be living in this world that you're creating, and we're not going to stand by it anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to fight for it. And it's really unfortunate that we have a global pandemic going on right now. So, we're not able to be mobilizing to the best of our abilities. But last year, there was so much going on, and we had such a movement going. Like, we're not going to be standing by idly while the world burns. We're going to do something about it. We're gonna stand up. And I know that I don't like speaking on behalf of other people, but I've seen what the youth are doing right now. I've seen, like, through Extinction Rebellion, through the Fridays for Future, through the climate hubs, through Al Gore Speaks, through movies, through local events. There's so much going on, and we're not gonna go we're not going to go silently into the night. We're going to fight, and no matter what it takes, we're going to do something to make the world a better place. And, it feels like such a weird thing that we have to fight so hard to just, not let the world catch on fire and not let fossil fuel industries completely take advantage of everything that's going on.
Hey,
But
Daniel, is there a big goal that young people are looking towards in terms of climate change activism? Like, I know the big Glasgow UN climate event that was scheduled for November this year got canceled and pushed ahead till next year. Is that something that young people are looking towards? Because at that time is when countries have to make real commitments, right? Is that something you're looking towards?
Yeah, honestly, what I want to see happen, and what I believe this movement wants to see happen, is just following the science. Like, I'd love to be able to stand here and tell you, I want this happening by this date, I want this happening by this date, but that's not my place. I'm not an expert. I'm not a climate scientist. We need to be listening to those people, respectively to climate change. And I think that what we need to do is force our governments to listen to the science. And it's such an abstract concept, but that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyone else care to chip in on that one? There's so many good thoughts here. Aleesha, you look like you're ready, no?
Yeah, I mean, I listened to this great podcast, and it's by Canada Land. That's a great news source if anybody's looking for some good news. But they do this podcast, and it's called Commons, and they did one on the oil industry called Crude, and it's actually quite interesting because, like, a lot of the big reasons that I hear a lot of older folks saying that we need to stick with fossil fuels, we need to stick with oil and gas, is because it's better on the economy and, it's fueling the economy. But if you really look at it, it's not. Actually, if anything, Alberta specifically is going to be put in such a deficit, especially once oil is, like, no longer able to be used, because there are a lot of orphaned wells, and these orphaned wells are wells that have dried up of oil. And there are so many of them. And in the oil industry's budgets, in all of these companies' budgets, they didn't leave the amount of money to clean up these orphaned wells. So there's just a bunch of, like, orphaned wells all over the place, polluting the environment, polluting the air in Alberta and other provinces as well. But it's terrible to think about. And the amount of money that it's going to cost. It's like, yeah, sure, like, oil, like, gas is cheap right now, but, like, what is the long-term cost of that? Not just on our environment, but also, like, in a language that the older generation can understand, on your wallets. Like,
You're
it's
leading into my next question here, Aleesha, but I'm just going to pause for a moment.
Mhm.
And I'd like to thank all the viewers who have joined us here tonight. It looks like we have a great turnout. And if the viewers could take a moment to like the Facebook page that you're watching this on. So if you're watching this on Aleesha's Facebook page, if you could like her page. If you're watching this on Angelique's Facebook page, if you could like her page. If you're watching on mine, if you could like it, because we have other events coming up in the future that people might like on climate change, housing, long-term care. And so you can find out more about them through our Facebook pages. So if you take a moment to like the page, that would be wonderful. I've got a question for Angelique, and I think this is one that's going to give everyone a chance to talk to. You're going to be interested in this one. What is more effective, incrementalism or revolution? And hold on, maybe revolution isn't the right word, because maybe Daniel likes revolution. Maybe Shak likes revolution too. How about incrementalism or a nonviolent social upheaval? Like, which is more effective in getting change in our society? Angelique, I'm going to let you start with that one.
I'm actually going to let someone else start because I saw two people who were very eager to answer that question, and I'm going to give them the space to do that.
Shak and then Daniel.
Okay, so the way I see it is right now, if I'm just looking at the one cause, the Black Lives Matter cause, I believe it's a revolution. And I use the word revolution because we're reevaluating and we're evolving. So we are in a complete revolution in my mind. The way that everything has played out is there is no more taking steps to a bigger goal. It's either we are going to change this right now, or you won't see that peaceful outcome that you want, because our generation is a very peaceful generation naturally. So if we don't feel like we're being heard, if we don't feel like there are changes happening, then it'll be very hard to do anything in increments. We have to re-evolve right now. And I think that with the pandemic and COVID-19, it's given us such a beautiful opportunity to do that. So the word revolution to me is the perfect word. It's the perfect word to describe how we're changing and how when we get out of this, we are going to be a completely different world. It's a new world, no matter how you look at it. When we get back into our norms, it's never going to be the way it was in January. It's never going to be the way it was in 2019. So this is a complete revolution. And I think this is the best way to go about it, because people are watching, people are listening, people are changing.
Daniel, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I think is that this is definitely a revolution. This is definitely something that's not going to go away quickly. And I really hope this doesn't go away quickly, because we have such a movement going on right now. We have such an audience. We have so many people listening to us. And what I want to see happen is, I don't want to see the world anything like it was in January, except for all the positive things, of course. But I don't want to see, what just happened in Barrie, where they went to a homeless encampment and then they evicted everyone. Like, where do you expect homeless people to go? Like, that's not the world that I want to see post-COVID, post Black Lives Matter, post-revolution. So that's why I will be a wholehearted advocate that this is a revolution, because there's so many people that don't even see anything wrong with the current world, and that needs to change. And I say that this revolution is something that we need all hands on deck here, because we've tried peaceful ways, we've tried going through government, we've tried protesting, we've tried all of those peaceful ways that people try. And I'm not going to advocate for building burning or something, but when I take a look at the trends through history, that's what it looks like is going to start happening, because the people are angry. We're so angry. And if the politicians don't listen to us, then we're going to take matters into our own hands, unfortunately. And, that's going to lead to like a little bit of not fun stuff happening. But at the end of the day, it's a revolution. And, I used to be such an advocate of like everything happening by the books. But at some point you got to rebel. You got to stand in the middle of the street and say, I will not stand for this happening anymore. I will not stand for the current government saying, oh, we're doing everything in our power for climate change, and then COVID-19 happens and it looks completely different. Like, the contrast between COVID-19 and the climate thing happening is such, like, we have the resources to mobilize, we have the resources to make the world a better place. It's just a matter of who is holding those resources and what they're willing to give up.
Incrementalism to me seems like stalling.
Yes, it's just stalling. And it's like, the world does not have the time to stall anymore. We need action. We need direct action now.
Hey, so we've seen revolution in terms of Black Lives Matter in the last month or two. We've also seen it in the past recently. I can think of the Arab Spring Revolution. Can we create those kind of the atmosphere where a revolution can happen, or do we have to wait for a certain moment and then the revolution happens? Can we kind of cause that?
Okay, can I? Good.
Yeah.
I believe that it does take some shake in the system for people to wake up. But once that shake happens, anything is possible. Anything is possible after that shake. I have seen people start movements on their own, but it is far more difficult to start a revolution on your own than it is to start a revolution in the midst of something. Because as long as you take what's going on and you guide it in the direction that you want it to go in, as long as it's positive, usually you'll see the revolution begin.
Right.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have these movements where we see people that are outside the movement take up the battle cry and they join in, and that's when you see big systemic change.
Yeah.
Can we somehow orchestrate that? Maybe now, Alicia or Angelique, you have some ideas on now. Is it possible to orchestrate that where we take the movement outside of our core group?
I mean, I think that the most important thing that we can do right now is just continue to educate people, continue to have our voices heard, and continue to be loud, and continue to be just in people's faces in the most intelligent and like intellectual way to like put the facts out there and put the information out there. Because I think once people get more educated and more informed and maybe step away from more conspiracy theories and actually look at the truth, then they'll be able to understand, they'll be able to see like, yes, this is what we need right now. I understand. I'm going to educate myself, like watching documentaries, reading books, reading articles. Like it's all so important to educate yourself and to educate others, because I think that once people are more educated and they actually see what's going on, because if it doesn't affect them, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just making sure that people have that information, that they know what's going on, because I think that once people are educated, then they're going to start to join in, and then that's when we start to see the revolution happening. We're already seeing it happening, and we're seeing it like more and more people join in every day. So like we just can't stop.
Yeah.
Angelique, is there? Sorry, Shak, you wanted to jump in there?
Sorry, I was just going to speak to what Aleesha had to say. And I started a web series called Becoming a Great Ally, where I opened up the conversation to anyone that wanted to be an ally. Anyone that's willing to understand, anyone that's willing to change can join this series. And the feedback is great. The people that are willing to change and willing to understand and be a part of the revolution can create quite a difference, because if I was just to use the BLM matter as a example, we are now seeing where the revolution can continue, where the moment is turning into a movement, where people are now educating themselves so that they can go out and be better people. So I'm with you. That's all.
Yeah, I think to further, I really appreciated Daniel sharing the point about the fact that we are in a time where we've literally witnessed how quickly governments can respond to change. And if we're going to talk about science and neglecting science when it comes to climate change, then why are we not neglecting the science when it comes to health? Because both of those things are correlated. And so for me, that's really problematic, that we've literally witnessed why we have a government that can no longer make excuses. And I think that this is maybe part of the conversation why we're living in a time where so many voices can be amplified and so much change is happening. But that's one thing that I just need to solidify in people's minds, is that we have governments who are listening to the science and are just picking and choosing when that is being done.
We've seen the government take huge action on COVID-19. They changed the way our entire society runs, but then there's no action on climate change. There's been no action on reconciliation. There's been no action on racism. We need to get the governments to make these a priority somehow.
Well, yeah, and that's where it leaves us to believe that the people at the bottom aren't as important. Right? It's hard to believe that our voices are important when there are thousands of us sitting outside City Hall and there's no change. It just how does that make us as activists feel, right? Our government has the opportunity to change an entire system right now. And it's almost like pulling teeth. It's almost like pulling teeth for equality, which I don't understand, but then it just plays into the systematic racism and oppression that's been going on for years. And if they change one thing in the system, you have to understand they've got to change everything. Mm-hmm. Everything in this system is flawed. It needs to be dismantled and rebuilt, and they are not ready for it.
Daniel?
Yeah. Just to kind of take that and run with it a little bit, I find it really interesting how we're able to mobilize so fast, and we're able to shut down the entire world basically, at the drop of a hat. Again, not the best response. There's still a lot of things that I wish we were doing a lot better, but just that. And there's so many indigenous communities that don't have drinking water, yet we can just stop everything in its tracks and continue and just and just work on the COVID-19. And it's like, we have the power to make sure that every indigenous community has instant drinking water at the drop of a hat. Like, we could just start shipping them water and resources and making sure that they're self-sufficient and, you know, listening to them. And I find it really interesting because the lack of doing that is direct evidence of the systematic oppression that's built into the system. Because if we could be doing these things, no, we can be doing these things. We're just actively choosing not to. Every single morning, everybody in our government wakes up and chooses not to act on these issues. They choose not to push forward bills. They choose not to do all these things. And I call that completely unacceptable. And that's one of the things that is coming from the revolution that we're going to change. We're going to make sure that people have access to water. We're going to make sure that missing and murdered Indigenous women are taken care of. We're going to make sure that people of color aren't being beaten in the streets anymore. We're going to make sure that all of these things are going on because we have the power to be doing it. And the absence of doing it is a direct allowance of it happening. And that's completely unacceptable. And we will not stand for that anymore.
Yeah. And one thing that I always say too, I'm sorry, I talk a lot, but one thing that I always say too is it's almost like they're determined to misunderstand what we mean. It's like every single time we break it down easily, they find something to poke a hole somewhere. And it's like, you know what we're trying to say. It's so simple. There's just a simple change that needs to happen. But it's almost like they are determined to not understand where we are coming from.
Yeah. Just to hop in on that just for a quick second. I know I talk a lot, but it's not people that don't understand. It's absolute, like, it's all intentional. This is all systematically put in place to make sure that people are discriminated against. And I'd like to imagine that there's just people that are confused and they're just generally trying to understand. They're like, no, we don't have the resources to make sure that people have clean drinking water. But that's not the case. There's people that are like, no, we're not going to give them clean drinking water because then, you know, that doesn't fit into the whole capitalism, everything that's going on there. And it's so intentional. It's so systematic. And
you see people actively engaging against it.
Angelique? Yeah, for me, like, it all comes down to, like, yes, I totally agree. Like, Aleesha has a point. Like, there are people who want to be educated. Where are they getting that education from? And how are they acquiring that? The media. Like,
I was going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. Shak, I had a feeling you wanted to bring it up. But there's also another, like, place where we are making it very clear what we are asking for. And we're we are doing the work for you. We're just asking for you to listen. And who do we get painted as? People of color who are causing trouble, Indigenous people who are asking for, you know, we have media that have the choice, like Daniel said, to wake up every day and choose what kind of information is disseminated to the general public. And what kind of information are they doing? They're not doing it to educate people. They're furthering that agenda. And that's really problematic. Who holds the media accountable?
Aleesha?
Exactly. And that's a big thing that, like, I have been grappling with lately, because, like, yes, I want to take a step back from social media and from just, like, media in general, because it's so toxic. Yeah. And it's so, like I said earlier, like, that there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. It's true. There are a lot of people that are willing to just, like, take one thing and turn it into something else. Like, I see a lot of people being like, oh, like, they're greedy, they're asking for too much, like, oh, like, the world's already great, like, and, like, the whole All Lives Matter movement. I don't even want to get started on that, but it's, like, so skewed because people don't understand the actual like the moving parts that are going on, because they won't listen to actual people that are talking. They'll listen to the media. And the thing is with the media, like, I mean, media in Canada is, like, unfortunately owned by, like, two large companies, and they're both very biased. You're seeing a lot of conservative news being put out there. And, like, I mean, I'm like, it's just very much one way or, like, the other. There's no kind of, like, whole view of what's going on, and people are getting, like, you know, like, either the I don't like what's going on, so I'm going to tell you that it's bad, or the I like what's going on, but I don't understand it, so, you know, here it is. It's never, like, really, like, a full picture of what's going on. And unfortunately, the news sources that do paint a full picture of what's going on, or that do the research and do put out content that is really great, They're not large news sources, so people aren't seeing it, and it's not getting as much reach as it should. Like, as I spoke earlier, I mentioned the news source Canada Land, and I use them quite frequently. But they're not the only ones out there. There are definitely other news sources out there that paint a less biased view of what's going on. But unfortunately, our main media sources are very biased, and that's where a lot of people are getting their information from. And it sucks that, you know, the newspaper comes right to your door, you scroll through Facebook and you see articles coming up, and a lot of them just, they're not it, and people just aren't getting the information that they need to get. So
it looked like Shak and Daniel wanted to respond to that.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, sure. Just talking about media, I hate to do a little bit of self-promotion, but I think it's really relevant given the conversation. I'm actually trying to launch a media group. It's called Leftist Media Group, and I'm trying to do a pretty of course it'd have a left-leaning bias, but I'm trying to do like a really unbiased representation. I'm sharing this on my media group right now, and I'm trying to really change all of that's going on in the media, that just garbage that comes out of it. And it's like, I did like the Black Lives Matter speeches, I was expecting to be able to find those online, and I couldn't find anything. I had an event where I had a police officer almost pull his gun on me, and he was just holding it, staring at me, and refused to take his hand off it. And the media reported just me yelling at him for 10 minutes, as I was talking about earlier. And it was like, I was so angry and so passionate, but such a controlled passion, and yet all that was reported on was just the video of me yelling at it, and not even a single mention that this police officer almost pulled out his weapon on me. And it's just so much. So if anybody that's a viewer right now is interested, it's called Leftist Media Group. We're on Facebook. We're looking for people that are passionate about this, that are tired about this. If you're interested, send the page a message and we'll throw you on a roster. It's all volunteer based right now. We're going to be covering the Canada Day protest tomorrow, and a bunch of other stuff. So I hate to do like a little bit of self-promotion during this,
okay.
but I think it's really relevant, because all of these issues that we're talking about, we're going to be talking about in a lot more depth. And I think that they're all very, very sorry, I can't figure out the word.
Can I follow up on something you said there, Daniel?
Yeah.
You said tomorrow there's a Canada Day protest or rally.
Yes.
And we do have a lot of people who are interested in perhaps becoming an activist watching tonight, or how they can be more of a presence in society today. So can we spend the last 10 minutes, all of us, talking about concrete ways people can get involved? So we've had lots of great discussions tonight, but I don't want people to walk away without something that they could do tomorrow or next weekend or next month. What are some things that perhaps you've done or that you've read about that you thought were good ideas? But what are some concrete things that people can do to get involved in their community? I'll just go around. We can jump all around. If anyone has something that jumps to the top of their head, go ahead and share it. Concrete actions. Shak.
I have something that I'm doing right now is, as I mentioned, the Becoming a Great Ally series. It's a great informational series, an open forum for an open communication for all of our allies that have questions that they may not be able to answer on Facebook right now, because as we know, social media is very touchy right now. So
and how do they access that, Shak?
So you can either go to Shak's World Facebook page and there's an Eventbrite link, or you can just go right to Eventbrite and look up Shoot with Shak, Becoming a Great Ally. So during this series, we are really trying to get to the bottom of how you can be a great ally for the long term and what it looks like to treat our BIPOC people correctly in today's society, even though things like media are against them, even though there are movies and there are music videos and there's music that is directly created to deprive these people of the throne they should be standing on, if I'm going to be completely honest. So yeah, coming in to learn about the history of those people, the history of what goes on in the workplace, and how you can be a great ally to these people. That is a way that you can change yourself, educate yourself, and re-enter the world a different person.
Thank you. Anybody else? What can we do tomorrow or next weekend or the next month to become more involved? What are some strategies that someone might suggest?
I can hop on that.
Sure.
I think that one of the easiest things that people can do is just listening to experts in each respective field. So listen to Indigenous voices when they're speaking. Listen to Black voices when they're speaking. Listen to climate scientists when they're speaking. And that's like the easiest thing you can do to become an activist. That's the easiest thing you can do, because honestly, there's so much that I don't even know myself, and I wish I was taught this stuff in school, but unfortunately, that's not the society that we live in. And I just wish that we could all just do that, and we could all just listen, because once you listen, you're going to figure out all of those fine little details, like, oh, I guess I can bake cookies and give them out to people. And, oh, I guess I can go to a protest and just stand there, and just my body being there at least adds to that media effect that there were so many people there, and you don't even have to say anything. And there's so many small actions that you can do. You can share something on Facebook, and that enough is taking that one piece of information and sharing it with your hundreds of friends, and that's making all of your hundreds of friends a little bit more educated. And every like that you get on your post that's like social justice related is somebody else accepting a premise and becoming more knowledgeable in something that they weren't previously. And I think that just small actions like that, especially just starting with listening, is the best way to do activism, because everything else after that will just come naturally.
Angelique, or I'm sorry, Aleesha, you decided to organize a rally a couple of weeks ago. Was that part of your activism role?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just it kind of came together like on a whim, really. Like, so I saw a comment on Facebook after the rallies that had gone on in Barrie, and actually a friend of mine that I had gone to high school with had made a comment saying that we need to continue doing these rallies because they're so important. And from there, I sent her a message, and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm interested in putting something together if we can. And from there, I sent out a message to Cassie as well. And the three of us were able to like put together and organize this event in less than a week. And for me, like, activism is in so many different ways. Like, I mean, I do my activism in so many different ways. Like, I mean, I go to protests, I share things, I talk to people, but that event itself was something that like I just felt was necessary in Innisfil, because we're seeing a lot of events happening in larger cities, but I hadn't seen anything in Innisfil yet. And I had seen a lot of, unfortunately, racist people talking in groups such as like Alcona Chats and Innisfil Ask Your Neighbors and like all of these groups on Facebook. And they were just saying like incredibly racist things. And it was just unfortunate. So I was like, you know what? Like, we need this. And I'd just like to take a quick second just to shout out the Decolonize Orillia rally that's happening. It's happening tomorrow in Orillia. It's at 3 p.m. and it's near the Champlain Monument at Couchiching Beach Park. So Brandon actually just made a comment, so I'm just kind of reading this out. But if you can't attend, please write a letter to Council and to Parks Canada in support of keeping the statue down. We need to mobilize. We need to work together on this. So if you can't attend for whatever reason, please do that at least if you can. But the event is tomorrow in Orillia, 3 p.m. So it's near the Champlain Monument, at Couchiching Beach Park. And it is just going to be a protest. We're going to be standing together. We are going to be mobilized, and we are going to be making our voices heard.
Thanks, Aleesha. Thank you to Brandon for sharing that information. Hey, Angelique, last year you decided to run in politics. Was that part of your role as an activist?
Wow, you've kind of framed my answer to this question really well.
Sorry. Oh, good. Okay.
No, it's okay. Yeah, if there's anything that I can see as a common thread from what we're all sharing tonight, I'm gonna quote an elder that I've had the amazing pleasure of learning from, Jacqueline Lavalle. And she always reminds us that kindness is our first teaching. And I really take that into my heart, in my spirit, with every day that I decide to move forward. Now, the reason I say that is because the fundamental, and coming back to what Shak was sharing at the beginning to kind of come full circle, is that our kindness enables us to be able to do the things that we want to do in this world. And so almost looking inwardly and asking yourself, okay, what do I feel passionate about? In what ways do I want to demonstrate my kindness to others? And how can I make that happen? With that simple thought, you can actually attract many of the things that you are able to do to be able to make a change in your community. And to follow what you're saying, Pekka, when I ran for NDP, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And I feel like many activists, that's exactly what happens. You just know that you want to make a change. You feel some little spark in you that tells you, okay, I can do this. Maybe you have a community that supports you in doing that. And then you start that journey and you begin it. And I mean, that's a very streamlined, very simple way to see it. But if you do remember that you have that innate capacity to care for other people in your relationships with other people, in conversations with other people, in taking care of yourself, you can take care of others. And essentially, I think that that's what activism is. And I think that that's a small way that you can do activism in your own little way every single day, whether it be baking cookies for a rally. You know, we all have our own capacities. We don't all have the ability to have loud voices, and that's okay, because we all rely on one another to be able to make these changes together. We are a collective. There's no such thing as making change on your own. We are collectives of people who are able to do that and support each other.
Angelique, thank you. That was a fantastic way.
Stay humble and kind, baby. Stay humble and kind all day.
Hey, I'm just looking at the time. It has been an hour, and that hour has gone so quickly. But I did mention that we would be an hour long, and that's the point we're at now. So I'd like to thank everybody. This has been a very illuminating discussion tonight, eye-opener for many of us. And Aleesha, you were fantastic tonight. Thank you for coming. Angelique, we really appreciate you being here tonight. Shak, you're so busy. Thank you for making time to join us. And Daniel, I'm so glad you could join us and give us a variety of perspectives tonight. And for Mike Washburn, I'd like to thank our producer, Mike Washburn, who's done this really great job behind the scenes at all of our Facebook Live events and have made these look really fantastic. So I'd like to thank the audience for spending an hour with us. And please follow along on Facebook. We're going to have more of these. And happy Canada Day to everyone. Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
So nice to meet you all. Thank you, Pekka, for hosting.
Thanks.